that privatizing the golf courses has been a good thing for the city?
I've only been back 2 months, so I don't know that. No, if you look at the numbers here, you'll see that in 2009, 2010, now that this does not consider the differences in what the bond payments were, or were in 2009, 2010, or are today. But expense over revenue in 910, 613 actual, budget this year 387 actual. So the supposition is yes.
Yes. Okay. I thought that's what it said. I just wanted to, I think it would be good that the city residents know that that was a good decision at the time. And moving forward, I think you're going to see it as the bond issue becomes better and better. You're going to see that it's even a better decision, probably.
And that was, it was intended that they would be able to reduce the difference in the bond that we weren't making, and so far it's proving to be. Now, we haven't had any capital for the last few years with golf courses, so that's a consideration. But, pressures and concerns. There are inefficiencies with part-time staff doing traditionally full-time work. What do I mean by that? If you have a part-time staff person as a programmer and they're there 20 hours a week, they're not there for a lot of the time that the public wants to speak to them. And then there are other staff persons trying to carry that, staff people trying to carry that load, but without the knowledge that the part-timers have. There's a great deal of public disappointment and frustration with the elimination of programs. You saw the attached sheet or the list of programs. There is disappointment. There's disappointment with our policies that we've implemented to enhance the revenues or to decrease or get to the cost neutral with the community center. Cost neutral mandate for services and programs that have traditionally been subsidized, the senior services, special events, community center, other rec programs that would never have been able to make to be cost neutral. We eliminated those. In some very rare cases, we have had some events but that means some other program is subsidizing that because the general fund is not subsidizing that. Very, very rare cases. We are making decisions about offering programs not on whether there is a demonstrated need or a desire of the community, but whether the revenue can support the program. There's an inability, we have an inability to maintain, we're experiencing that's maintaining buildings and facilities with reduced capital. We have postponed some projects because of not having any capital. Give you an example, not that it isn't that, just as an example, the Aquatic Center is 21, 22 years old. We've never replaced the roof there. It's probably going to be necessary in the not too distant future. The pumps at the pool, the outdoor pool, there are 8 pumps. We have rebuilt 4 of them. We haven't rebuilt the other 4, and they have a life of about 20 years. So it's those kinds of things that eventually we're going to have to make some decisions on. The remaining staff.
Mr. Miller?
Carol, can you comment on the irrigation at Sylvan Glen? Because at one time that was budgeted as a capital project, but it was pulled out.
The irrigation system at Sylvan Glen is 35 years old at least.
I think it's older.
I was maybe 1970, 40 years old, 40 plus years old. The staff has been able to fix some of the things that go wrong, but that system should be, has lived its life. I mean, it would be reasonable to think that it would need to be replaced. We did have some budgeted funds or allocated funds for that at one time, but we have eliminated that. We used that money in other that system fails, completely fails, there's a good possibility that there won't be any golf for at least a season until that is repaired. And it would make sense to plan for that, but it is a question of budgeted funds. Do we have the funds to do that? The remaining staff, the 6 that we do have, are in some cases less effective and less efficient because they're doing jobs for which they have never done before, and even wouldn't have qualified to, would not have been candidates for the job 6 or 8 years ago. Because of the way things are, they've been on staff. We combined, for example, at one time we had a fitness coordinator and an aquatics coordinator. We also had another aquatics person, so 2 aquatics people. But that fitness coordinator and aquatics coordinator became one person. The aquatics coordinator, the former aquatics coordinator, is now doing the fitness coordinator work. He was an aquatics guy. So there's some inefficiencies with that. He doesn't have expertise in the fitness realm like the fitness coordinator did, as an example. Next. Additional pressures and concerns. There's a reduced ability for us to hire part-time staff because wages have not changed and there have been no increases. And again, like you've heard already, there's no ability really for us currently to grow with the workloads of staff, reduced hours, furloughs, and so on. And in our case, furloughs are 5.5 days per month that we lose in hours worked because of furlough. I did say, but I want to emphasize that we are making decisions based on whether programs can be supported by revenue and not whether they are the most desired activities with a demonstrated need in the community. We have had, and whether there's public interest, senior programs, nature center, of course, and many others. We have cut, reduced, so on because of that revenue cost neutral mandate. What are the future needs? If programs, events, and activities that are desired by the public are offered, additional staff will be needed. As we spoke, the limited capital funding in the recent past may mean that there will be additional cost for some of the capital projects because of the, an increased cost because we have to postpone those things. We'd like the ability to maximize staff by eliminating furlough and offering competitive pay rates. Question.
Gold stuff.
Yeah. I've got limited time. Questions? Yes.
Just out of curiosity, where does it, maybe everybody knows, where's that historical museum fit into this? I know we funded them last time. And who's that report to? What group does that report to? They just disappear, or what happened to them?
I work day-to-day managing the contract, and then there's just it's identified in the budget, there's no department.
So we're not gonna see it on
Well, we can
But we're not
obviously
doing
talk
it.
about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've allocated a certain amount of funding towards it, and
there. And we
we'll
allocated
discuss
last year,
it.
we gave them some money.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll let the cat out of the bag, all those groups want more money.
No?
Yes.
I'm shocked.
Well, there is some maintenance expenses that are associated with that are separate from.
Yeah, because they're still our assets, and we would have to do capital project plans. In fact, we meet with Lorraine Campbell to help do the capital planning for that. But it's a programming type of issue that those nonprofits have to struggle with day to day, both at the Historical Village and the Nature Center.
In regard to the community center, so it's obviously had a drop of usage with charging for all these programs.
Is it just been a slight drop, or is it like dramatic? Is that upstairs area?
Well,
Use it
okay,
all.
so there's a couple things. Community center and recreation programs, I consider them different. If we are talking about the passes sold for use of the pool, the gym, and the fitness area, we are actually returning to 2008 numbers right now. We did have a pretty dramatic drop, but we're climbing back up. Programmatically, those programs that we are offering have not had steep declines, but we are serving fewer people because we have fewer programs. Sports camps are a good example. We did, it sort of follows the community center pattern, big drop from 2007, 2008, but we have, the last couple of years, have climbed up in some of those numbers too.
I think from my perspective, we welcome all plans for decision-making purposes when we decide on the budget. If there's a strategic plan that we need to see regarding the irrigation issue, I think we would like to see that, because the last thing we need is for the golf course to dry up, which will cut down on play, which will cut down on revenue, and have that issue. So I think we need to see some kind of a strategic plan regarding that again, and what the cost would be, and the ramifications if we don't do anything about it. So I personally would like to see that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but
What were they looking for, Mark? What was the, what are they thinking they're gonna have to replace there?
How much would it cost?
Well, how extensive, all the irrigation for the whole course?
Would be somewhat over $1 million. Yeah. Could it be phased? Probably, it's possible. I mean, at one time we were planning to do that. We eliminated those funds from the budget, so we haven't really, and I clearly haven't looked at it recently. But it's certainly something that takes some planning if it is going to be something that we're going to do, and we will plan to present it.
I'd like to see a plan anyways. I mean, we just put brand new golf carts out there, and if we think we need to spend money on golf carts, they're going to be useless if we can't use the carts. So I think we do need to see maybe a plan in place for that, if we could.
Could we call it a capital improvement plan for almost, because I heard the community center was an issue, I heard the aquatic center was an issue, and I heard the golf course as major capital planning that's gone on but hasn't been able to be funded. Would it be okay to incorporate those three areas?
You might want to add the roof to the nature center on that also, because I've been hearing for 2 years that we're patching that and it's leaking, and
Yeah,
we have some responsibility to that also, I believe. So maybe if we could
Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
could do that too. Councilman Teach?
Do you have any idea, as far as our rates for room rental and for the different activities, are they comparable to what other cities and the market is? Are they high, low? Is it, I don't know.
There are few community centers or few cities that have facilities like ours. They are comparable to those other facilities, but those other facilities are not necessarily proximate to us.
Right.
So it's a little bit hard to compare to other communities. To the private sector, that's a different question, and I don't know exactly where we stand completely.
Because I guess I know today I could go to the community center, rent a room for $75 an hour. But if I wanted to go to the Hilton to rent a room for the same meeting, I think the community center provides a great service to the city and to residents. at a very inexpensive price. I know the price has gone up, but to be honest, it is the cheapest deal in town. I mean, as far as a good quality room in a respectable spot, so.
But I think it bears pointing out that there are a lot of groups that that use the community center that don't have a choice of another location. For instance, a senior card club is not going to go to a banquet center for an activity.
Sure.
So there's some consideration, I think, for some of those. And of course, at one time, those groups wouldn't have been charged at all. I mean, obviously, we're charging now, and the question is it reasonable?
I'm talking about some of those large rooms.
Banquet rooms.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
a great deal for the hourly rate compared to, I mean, I looked at around Troy, and I was just kind of wondering as far as what your analysis was.
Yeah, yeah.
This is really just more of a comment in terms of coming to consensus, because really I'm looking at the future needs that are listed on the page before, and they pretty much seem like the things that we're gonna want you to take a look at, for the most part. But I know we're not gonna be able to handle all of them or make all of these changes, within 1 year's budget. So in terms of prioritizing, I think it's important that we look at furloughs, especially if we're gonna be doing that with the other departments, the two that we've already talked about. So that probably needs to be consistent. And then my preference would definitely be to take a serious look at capital funding, especially because we really haven't had any discussions about it in the last couple of years, to see what that possibly might entail before we look at the programming. Only because programming is just as important in terms of its function in the community and what the residents and the businesses want. But it was such a hard transition to make the first time around when we changed the policies, we removed programs, and we put all these fees in place, that I really don't want to tackle that issue until we tackle definitely the staff issues that we're going to be looking at kind of through each department, and the capital funding, because I don't want to give anyone the impression that we're in a position where we can change some things and not the other, because really the only way I feel like we were able to accomplish that, and it wasn't easy, but was basically taking the hardline approach that across the board we had to do that, because we had a lot of programs for certain groups that we thought about maybe trying to exempt or do other things. So at this point, I'd like to see that stay the same until we have some good information and consensus about funding and staffing issues.
Some time ago, I got an unsolicited flyer from a company that would want to take over the aquatic center, and so we could outsource it like the golf courses. And noticing there's a little bit of a shortfall in the 2012-13 expenses are higher than revenue. Is that something that we should investigate further, or is it something that we want to table?
That's a question for me, because you're looking at me, I think.
Exactly.
Without her comments, that's one of the goals. That was one of the list of 12 to look at services that could be contracted out. Now, is that a good idea? I don't know. I know it was looked at years ago. I think it's our due diligence to do it again, wherever we think it might make sense. So that's my short answer, is a yes.
Does that mean requesting, proposal? I mean, is that the I mean,
I think not yet. I think you have to do the analysis first. You have to do the background work and see, what companies are even out there. If there's only one company and you go bid it, how does that happen? Or are there others? What do other aquatic centers do? I bet Carol can answer all those questions right now, but I'd rather she write it down and really do another presentation.
We still have 12 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
Get to that.
I'm not an accountant, but I know there are depreciation issues that involve the aquatic center, and it's not a simple, yes, we can farm it out kind of thing because of the depreciation, and it's an accounting. If you want to jump in.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, thank you. If I can, just to reiterate, from a financial standpoint, the aquatic center did actually have a net profit last year of about $9,500, which remember from my presentation, it was about the first time ever. It also had some positive cash flows. What we did with those cash flows was actually pay back some borrowings from the general fund and reimburse the general fund for some of those borrowings from previous years. Also with the same thing with Sanctuary Lake. And really the irrigation system that was funded from a liquidity standpoint was really to cover some of the cash shortflows from Sanctuary Lake. That's why the $9 million didn't just go away. What it did is we considered golf course operations as a whole, and are they liquid, and to keep from a funding level from any borrowing from the general fund for those type of operations. And really it's just in regards to the debt. You know, that from an operating standpoint, the golf courses are doing fine. It's funding from a liquidity standpoint, the interest on some of that debt payment.
So it's not a simple answer, just because revenues and expenses look like they're close or one or the other. We do have some underlying issues that are associated with the aquatic center and the golf courses. That's correct. Councilman Teets.
But I still think it makes sense to investigate it, don't you? I mean,
Absolutely.
because even though it's positive cash flow, it could be more positive. You know, maybe it could be better.
I think it's one of our top 12, and I think it,
You know, not to get into the whole budget discussion, but it's only positive cash flow, but you're not maintaining the facility.
exactly.
So there's a problem. So you need to look at other areas and how you can increase the liquidity, if you will. You know, however you skin the cat, the reality is you have to take care of the pumps and the roofs and the gym floors and these kind of things, and that takes cash.
Absolutely, and that's the point.
That's the point.
That's the point. Why you have some cash flow, but you may not, because you have to fund those capital needs.
But on point with Councilman Henderson and Councilman Teets, those are issues that we need answers for, so that we can make a decision.
We should look at it,
absolutely.
for sure.
I just, to piggyback Councilmember McGinnis, I agree with and support that, you know, that although we want to put programs back and we want to take a look at that there are some more important issues at this time. Personally, I'd like to see maybe a top 5 programs that are getting a lot of requests from the community to put back in, and so we could have at least some education as to what the public really thinks is important to them, and at some point we might want to reevaluate that too. But I do agree 100% with what was said about that.
Is there consensus with that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great idea, actually. Top 5.
Top
Need to be
5.
cost neutral.
Huh?
Yeah, you look at the top 5.
Community events, though, aren't cost neutral, so we just need to
Well, if you can get people.
sponsors.
Sponsors.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe we can work a
Yeah.
different angle as to,
Yeah.
You know,
it doesn't always have to be that the
Naming
city
rights
spends
for
the money,
facilities.
you know.
just,
I mean,
I make a statement here, just because we have a surplus unassigned fund balance, let's don't go and spend it. Let's don't get to this table and say, we didn't get here by accident, it was because of planning, and a lot of people gave up a lot of, you know,
I'd like to know
furlough
what our
times and
choices.
so forth, and we're better off than we thought we were going to be this time last year, okay? But let's don't sit here in this pre-budget meetings and start finding ways to allocate it. I think anything we look at, we need to look at adding back and how we can fund it, you know. We had to make drastic cuts, and we had to do it quickly. Maybe there was a better way. Now we got a little breathing room. Let's look and see if we can add things back. How do we get sponsors or something to make it cost neutral, not just to
I think
pay
we
down
just,
the fund
just
balance.
want choices. We want to
Choices.
see what all of our choices are is really, I think, what we're asking for here, so.
I hear you.
Councilman Henderson.
We had a community meeting, a week or two ago for Parks and Rec, correct? Did anything come out of that meeting with regard to requests from people in the city that, things they wanted to see back?
That meeting was a public hearing or public input session for the development of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That document, that plan is still in process. It'll be reviewed by the park board in a week or two.
February 21st.
February 21st, with also time for public comment at that meeting. and development of the entire plan, probably the 1st of May or thereabouts.
I think before that, I think middle of April.
But to answer your question, things come out, yes, a survey and public hearing or public input session. There were facilities and that were desirable, and I will say, top on the list came out, trails and paths.
Always.
Not any different than what we saw
Vision 2020,
5 years ago. Yeah, Vision 2020. There were certainly other things that were desired by the public, but that dog park, so on, but that was overwhelmingly the top choice or majority. But you will see that document in the not too distant future. Okay.
Mr. Kushnick, did you want to summarize?
I would summarize it by saying the ability to maximize the furlough issue, the CIP planning, and identify the top 5 programs that could be considered to be brought back with a basis for funding them. How's that sound?
Capital,
Yeah, I said the capital improvement plan. Right?
And the outsourcing still's in there.
well, that's in our top 12.
That's in top 12 everywhere. It's
Good. Okay, good point. It's, I guess I keep that as overriding
Right.
our top 12, yeah. Okay, good.
Do we need another break, or do we want to go?
ready to roll.
Let's plow ahead.
Okay. Mr. Kushnick, if you want to intro C3, the Department of Public Works, if we're ready.
I will. I would like to. I don't want to say we saved the best for last, because
We saved the longest.
we certainly saved the most for last. So if you thought you were going to get a break, you better strap yourself in, because these guys do a lot, they got a lot, and you might as well get comfortable. So Tim is here with his team, and they're going to go through, each one will go through their respective part of the operation, and it's very informative. So.
Well, I also want to thank council, mayor, citizens for coming out and welcome. Going to do that for all of our staff so that each don't have to do that, try to keep things moving. I'm going to tell a short story. Brian asked me if I thought these particular meetings were important. I said when we did Citizens Academy, that was one of my suggestions, that require each council and mayor person to be involved in those. The public works operation at that time didn't include building operations or parks. Our Citizens Academy went 5.5 hours. We will keep it a lot shorter than that. But to the point that Brian brought, we have a lot of information that we can't even bring to you tonight. But we're going to try to give you as best overview as we can. And with that said, the mission statement for our departments are to preserve the taxpayers' investment in the city's infrastructure and to provide services that guarantee safe, clean, and healthy environment. Short and sweet. I'm going to do a little overview of the staffing. As you can see, back in 2008, including the Parks and Building Operations Department and all the other traditional departments from Public Works, we had about 115 full-time people, 80.5 part-time employees. 2013, so today we're looking at 87 for full-time. That's a 25% drop across all of those departments and divisions, and down to 30.4 people as far as part-time. There's appear to be some inequities across where some divisions were cut. I'm going to go through each of those just to make a short statement to give you a little overview so that when my staff goes through it, you'll have a little bit more understanding of what they're talking about. The Water and Sewer Department is a department that generates money based on water and sewer fees and some other fees. So they have specialized people in that department, but it's also a department that supplements many of the other departments. when we do snow and ice control, the water department, every last staff person is on that unless there's a health safety issue with the water service or the sewer service. So, you know, what we've done, and we always did, but it's even more important now, we cross boundaries between all of our departments. We don't have a lot of restrictions. That was not, you know, the golden egg that we couldn't touch, but it's a very, very, very important part of what we do across all of Public Works. Going down into refuse and recycling, that department is pretty much mostly contract, but we did have a 1.3 full-time people, a half a part-time employee, and that was reduced to a half a full-time person and a 0.1 part-time person. Well, you know, you don't have part-time people, full-time, part-time people. But what we do have is we used to have a full-time director, superintendent, supervisor for refuse and recycling. That individual left the city, retired, took an incentive, and what we did is we shifted that full-time responsibilities over to our office coordinator. She shifted some of her responsibilities down, but in effect, we were able to still cover all that by those reductions. And I guess one thing I should say is, when we see all these, you know, 0.3s, 0.2s, 0.6, I'm one person, but I'm divided across 4 different of these avenues. So, you know, that's how we get those fractions or decimal points of staff. And then going down into building operations, they were and still are a full service maintenance operations. There are some things that Steve's are going to bring out that reasons why we went from 12 full-time to 7 full-time currently. We really have some pressures there that I would say of all these divisions, he's probably got more pressures to perform right now with what has transpired over these last 4 years. Streets and drains, you know, one of the highest points and pressures that they were always under, you know, for the last 30 years is snow and ice control. Without the water department, we wouldn't have been able to reduce some of the staffing from 31 down to basically 21. You know, lost almost 10 full-time people there. The Parks Division, same thing. A lot of services were contracted out, and also there's a lot of services we don't provide anymore. And I'll allow Kurt to go over that also. Fleet maintenance, you don't see as much of a decline in number of staff there, even though we're going to show you, some reductions in equipment and vehicles that we have. But we also have some insourcing that we'll talk about that is beneficial. And Sam Lamorato and Tom Darling and I sat down the other day, did a little analyzing, to prove out why it's important that we continue to do that and how that supports the city. And so, with that being said, we're going to move on, and I want to have Rick Shepler. Yes?
Could I just ask a question before you? Is this all in line with the ICMA study with what came out? Because my recollection is when we go back to that we added four back.
We actually added 5 people back into the streets and drains. That was targeted to be down to 16.
Right. So that's, you're at ICMA recommendation levels to be sustainable?
Yes.
Pretty much?
At least for, the majority of those divisions. Building operations, there's some extraneous things that we're going to talk about that puts them, in my mind, up at the top of what there's pressures out there for them to perform. And not getting too off track, but, Carol Anderson and council here and Mayor, you had a discussion on, capital and how we're not replacing things. Well, what happens in your house if you don't invest in capital? The man over here gets more pressure because his work orders go up. He's out doing work that we really shouldn't be if there's a good, effective capital program.
Understood. Councilwoman McGinnis?
And can I ask a question about the numbers that are up here? Are these the numbers in 2013 that are budgeted for, but are they also all, the positions are also all full?
They're all budgeted. These are budgeted numbers for 2013, but no, they have not all been filled. Give an example. In the water and sewer department, we actually have been short 3 people most of this year. We're starting to get in the process to get in those queues. I mean, I don't know how many positions, if there was 80, if there was 100 that had to be juggled around and starting to fill, and it's taken a long time to do that. HR just doesn't have the staff. You know, they went from 4 or 5 to 2 for a long time. And so we're just starting to see some of that be able to come back because they've been able to put some part-time people to work there to help get that moving. Steve, with 12 people down to 7, he only has 4 people there right now. We got a vacancy, 2 vacancies, and we got 1 person off on injury. So he's from 12 to 4 in actuality. So we know we have not filled all those positions. We had a gentleman who came into the building operations department. We're paying him the wages that we can pay based on what we've been told. He came here in 2 weeks, he left. His former employer felt that he was more important. They went back and he got a significant wage increase. He got significant benefit increases. They're over and above what we could even come close to. So we spent a lot of time investing into hiring that person, and in 2 weeks, you know, and he was a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. We were glad to have him, but we couldn't keep him. So I don't know if that answers all the questions that everybody's had with this particular slide. And this is a slide that probably we should have, you know, create more questions and discussion on than most of the other slides here. So we'll try to move along with it. Certainly, if you have any questions that come up later, you want to refer back to this, be glad to get into that with you. So Rick Shuffler's water and sewer superintendent. He's been in the water industry for, we won't say how many years, but many, many, many years. He's been with the city of Detroit for over 5 years now. Over 6.
Time flies.
Time flies. And so I'm going to let him go through that, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion after that.
Okay, hi, good evening. Water and sanitary sewer fund. First off, who we are and what we do. First off, we're an enterprise fund. Our water and sewer fees that we collect only be spent on water and sewer activities. So we don't get any general fund money. A lot of cities have to actually give general fund money to the water systems. We are totally self-sufficient and more with our water and sewer. So what do we do? Provide the billing and water and sanitary sewer services, do regular and final billings, schedule meter maintenance, and exchange and receive and investigate consumption and billing questions. We maintain the water and sanitary sewer infrastructure, 500 miles of water main, includes the breaks that happen, the service lines, the curb boxes, everything that goes along with that. 400 miles of sanitary sewer. We annually clean every sewer in the city. We've been getting close. The last couple of years we've been a little short, but we catch up after about a 13th and 14th month. So we televise the system when we can. Our TV truck's getting a little old, so we're going to probably do something there in the future. And we do all kinds of repairs in the sanitary system. We have 5,815 fire hydrants. We flush and winterize them every year. Start in September and usually get done about just before Thanksgiving. We paint them in the summertime with the summer help. We get about 1/5 of the city done a year, and it's accumulation after a while. We used to, back in '06, we were doing every hydrant every year, which I kind of cut off that. That was a little too much paint on them. We have 6,738 water main gate valves. We actually turn every one every year. That's great for the system. There's not many cities that can do that, so we're very lucky there. The same situation. Last year we didn't quite make it. We're going back this year and doing the extra month that it takes to get it completed. So some of the things I got coming up will probably tell us why we're not getting there. Our water meters, we got 27,250 water meters. We replace residential every 12 to 15 years, and our larger meters every 5 to 10 years. Our water revenues come from our 530,000 MCF for 1,000 cubic feet that we contract with the EWSD every year. Actually, that is this year's new rate down from, what were we, 5? Oh, I didn't do. What were we last year? 578? 576.
576.
That came down a little bit. That's why we had that little bit of increase from the Detroit system. Some of the other fees we collect are tap fees, private fire line fees, water improvement, and hydrant rentals. So, and again, all that money can only be spent on water and sewer activities. Our budget history. Trying to budget for water and sewer systems is very difficult. A wet year versus a dry year can be 15 to 20%. We take a stab at it every year. Here's our budgeted figures, 2007-8 to 2012-13. You'll see the 2010 and 11 and 2011-12 were very wet years. So it rained a lot. So we didn't have a lot of sewage going in there. Well, we had a lot of sewage, I mean, and didn't sell the water. So, that is what it is, basically. Some of our cost reductions we've been through, furlough days are killing us. 1.6 full-time employees, that is, for our department. We had a wage reduction. Our water meter updates, meter interface units, we've finished that program out. What that did for us was, what used to take us 16 days to read the section of bills we were going to bill out that month, we can now do it in one day with our drive-by system. So save man hours there, we can use them elsewhere throughout the system. Now we are rebuilding our own meters in-house. We used to buy all brand new residential meters and commercials. Now we're bringing them in, taking the guts right out of them, painting them. First we sandblast them, paint them up, put new guts back in, test them, and send them back out in the field, saving quite a bit of money. 2008 was it? We developed our outdoor water use ordinance that shifted our peak hour usage back. Well, now you can only sprinkle your outdoor underground sprinkling systems from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. That helped with our water rates. Helped the first 5 years real good. There are cities that are starting to catch up with us now. So that's kind of why the whole thing with DWSD, there's a pie out there that they have to split up the cost with to all the 126 communities. We were way ahead of the curve. Now the other cities are catching up, so the curve's kind of spreading back out at us. But that'll be a one-time shot, that 10% we got this year. So we'll be back in the normal range the next 5 years, unless we do something different. We retap all of our own services in for our new water main jobs. We have been. We evaluate each one as they come up. We bid it both ways. We had the contractor bid it to retap the service tap for every house to the new main and disconnect the old. We know what we can do it for. You see the contract price, we've been able to beat them by $100 per house, last few, so that's quite a bit of savings. And you're looking at, you do 400 houses, each main job, that's a couple, $200,000-300,000. So we're doing real well there. Pressures and concerns. Keeping our staffing at budgeted levels. Currently, we have 3 positions unfilled. I think we're starting to interview for those soon, so that'll be a good thing. We maximize our current staffing levels, we'll be in good shape. Staff hours are reduced because of furlough time, which I already went through. Future needs, we need to continue our aggressive infrastructure maintenance and replacement. Engineering is very helpful in doing our capital improvement plan every year. I sit down with Mr. Hootery and we go through all the water mains. We got rid of the 4-inch. Now we're working on the 6-inch water mains, getting rid of all those in a timely fashion. We look at the water breaks, map those out through our GIS, and we're able to take sections at a time, and we're getting rid of those. Which keeps our water loss, we're down like 5%. Average American Water Works Association is 10 to 12%, so we're doing very well there. Keeps our main breaks low. We keep our PRVs at a good, our pressure reducing valves that we pressurize the rest of the whole city with. Keep those stable. Keeps our main breaks down. 18 last year was the lowest we've ever been. So it's a great thing. Similar sized cities, they're up to 80 to 100. It also keeps our fire hydrants in service. We never have more than 1 or 2 hydrants out, and only 1 hydrant at the most usually. If it gets hit in the wintertime, that's what we usually do. But Bill Nelson told me to make sure I added to that one, that also helps the ISO rating. Thanks. So we just need to increase our productive hours through the furlough time, and we'll be in great shape. That's all I got.
Questions? Any questions by anybody?
Can you address the water rate increase? I'm sure a lot of residents saw, you know, in the newspaper it says 10%, and all these other cities it's 4% or 5 or 3. Can you just kind of address that for the citizens? Because they'll be paying more and they'll probably go, why in the world?
Well, that was the wholesale cost. They're not necessarily going to pay more.
Okay,
yet.
this is...
So we do the budget.
And we did just put out a report in last council meeting notes, and Cindy's going to be putting that on the website.
Good.
Okay. And we did get some calls on that.
We did, yeah.
And a lot of that has to do, that 10% is, this year we had the reopener after 5 years to make adjustments.
Contract reopener.
Contract reopener. Some key things in there, you know, the peaks, we shifted them successfully, but also with the additional building permits and activities and more activity at the community center. Along with that, people are feeling a little bit more secure. It was a little drier year, people spent more money, they were putting out water on their lawns. And Rick has been tracking all this, and so even though our peaks went up, we still shifted the majority of the peak out. That pattern over the last 6 years, if you took 1 year and put them right on top of each other, they haven't changed. It's just the volume changed. So we did have to make some adjustments that did increase our contract amount. If you looked at the other 27 communities that also opened up their contract, most of them went up in different ranges from 6 to 15%. So we were in the middle of that group. One issue with that reopener, and why there was a whole bunch of communities across the board that were only 4.4%, those folks didn't have reopeners, so they didn't have any adjustments in their contract, what do we call that? Schedule B or? Exhibit B, you know, that has those types of things. There's going to be another third of those contracts up next year and another third the year after. Detroit could not address all 127 different customers in 1 year. So what has happened is we came up to the table first. We were able to, for the first 4 years, do very well. We were probably close to half what the average increase was over the last 5 years, between 3 and 5%. What that does next year, all those people who have reopeners will have adjustments like we have. Some up, some down, but you'll see that group more in the 8 to 10 to 12% range increase. The third year, you're going to have the same issue with that third group of contract reopeners. And as Rick said, we'll probably be pretty good over the next 5 years. So there's going to be some additional increase because we're anticipating some increased volume sales, and also because of our additional building permits and things that maybe some of the other communities aren't seeing. So that in a nutshell is why 10% for us. And if you look at that report, we had another community in the area, and they do have a little higher rates, and it's very difficult to compare apples to apples with communities because they're so different. But that community actually reduced theirs by 10% because they had overestimated their peaks. It cost them for 5 years. We were very aggressive and came very close to what our peaks were. During the summertime, Rick and I would come in, he'd look at the charts that we have availability from Detroit, and we'd take a big sigh. As our peaks went up in the non-exclusionary period, as they came down, we just missed it several times. So we had to increase some of those to increase our rate. But this other community that's out there, they dropped 10%, but their rate still is almost $8 more than ours.
Right, I think that was the other part, is that the actual rate number is, Troy is much lower, so you know, when you go from $10 to $11, it's a 10% increase, but if you're going from 15 to 16, I mean... It's a 6% increase. Right, yeah, percent really isn't relevant at the end of the day.
Story.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to that, and Tom will be going through how to set those rates, you know, for the budget, and you know, he sits down with Rick and I, and you know, it's a complicated issue. Any other questions for Rick or myself?
I win.
All right.
We can go to the end. And then
Refuse and recycling. Talked about this. You know, it's mostly contract information or contract work that's done. We basically are the liaison to the community, and we monitor all the billing. We answer all the calls when there's concerns. We do education. We are at a point where we've got about 26,700 homes, condos, small businesses, you know, 4,000 apartments. We, as most of you probably know, are a part of a consortium. We're one of 12 members. We are on the board, and we almost have 1/4 of the vote on that board because it's gauged based on, you know, volumes of materials that are picked up in the communities, and Troy being one of the largest, so our voting percentage is much higher. Actually, SACRA holds our collection, hauling, and disposal contracts. Back in 2007, when we went and combined with all these other communities, everybody used to have their own contract, and then SACRA would just take care of the disposal. We were able to, at that point in time, reduce our cost on those contracts by banding together to see if these larger contracts would be advantageous. At that time, our goal was a minimum of 10% reduction. City of Troy enjoyed an 18% reduction at that time. You know, we process everything and pick up everything at the curb to be taken to SACRA for either being recycled or disposal. Refuse and recycling revenue. We have a dedicated millage, and in the current budget, it's 1.05. That averages for a collection of a household about $102. I can tell you, living in Rochester Hills, where the city of Rochester Hills does not have refuse in their budget, and I know you've heard this before, that, you know, they're a full service community, but they don't have refuse collection, that I pay twice that. Recycling, we get credits at $50 a ton, $130,000 a year, or last year we received a credit back. The other side of that is when you don't put that tonnage in the landfill, we get another savings of $27 a ton. So through our recycling program, we're looking at almost $300,000 on an annual basis. We get a little bit of money back. We buy about $10,000 worth of bins. We recoup 87% of that because we sell them to residents. And sometimes we have a bin blitz in the fall so that we try to encourage people to get an extra bin or two because you can put out as many recycling bins as you want. And you know, some of the issues with recycling bins is that people don't want to carry 10 or 12 to the curb, and right now, and I'll get into it in a little bit, what SACRA is looking at to try to elevate recycling and make it easier for people to put things to the curb. Revenue, expenses, took $30,000 out of fund balance. Fund balance is only at $54,000. Tom tells me that fund balance should be 15% of what the budget is. We should have about $600,000 there if we want to be solvent. Here's what we budgeted. This is how close we've been because most of our budget or our expenses are contractual. We know how many collections we have. There's a lot easier way to calculate that and to set your budget very close to what is actually going to happen. We're not affected by the weather like water and sewer are. We're not affected by like streets is when we have a light winter or a heavy winter. So that's why you see this consistency here. Refuse and recycling cost reductions, staff reduction, again from 1.5 to 1. Part-time in 2009 is when it actually happened. Part-time has been reduced. Position consolidation, combining recycling coordinator with the office coordinator. Really small amounts of cost reduction. Leading very well into the pressure and concerns we have with this fund. The lack of fund balance, as I just mentioned. The CPI cost, there's a clause so that the contractors get an increase based on the CPI, not to exceed 3% a year. There's a fuel cost. There's a fuel indicators that are just like a CPI, but they're for fuel. There's a contract escalator in there, and the contractor at the time that we put the contracts together had to pick 100%. How much of that is your operations? How much is fuels? So each of the contractors made different choices. Our contractor was kind of in the middle, Tringali Sanitation, and those escalators have been pretty consistent. Increased recycling efforts and awareness to decrease waste being sent to the landfill. That's just going to be a reoccurring message. As I was speaking before, I told you that SACRA and the communities and the board are looking at what they can do to recycle more, provide more savings. We're looking at single stream recycling programs. Basically, you can throw everything in one pot and it can be picked up and it's sorted at a facility. We don't have a single stream facility to sort at. But I can tell you what we're doing at SACRA is we're looking at the Madison Heights incinerator. That's a great asset, not as an incinerator, but as a location and a facility. We went out and solicited companies to see what they would offer as far as possibly, their part to building a single stream center, with SACRA having the land as our part to that. and we're proceeding in that direction. We've got a couple of companies that are interested, and we'll be bringing more information to you with that in mind. SACRA does have capital funds that they've been trying to generate in order to, put these programs for long-term savings into effect. Part of that program, you'd be able to put out a 65 or a 90-gallon cart instead of an 18-gallon bin. Makes the dumping faster. The sorting at the curb takes time. The sorting would be done at a facility, and I've been to a couple of them, one over in Grand Rapids, and the facility there, in the first 3 years of their expectation, they were going to push through 500,000 ton of recycling. They had a demand so large from the other communities in the area that they were pushing over 600,000, and they're turning people away because their facility can't handle anymore. The thought was that they built it large enough for expansion, and they truly didn't. SACRA does send all our products for recycling to market, so we try to get some of the best products on that.
Yeah, quick question. We got roughly 30,000 households in Troy. Do you have an idea of how many of those actually recycle and how many just absolutely don't?
Yes, and we've done surveys over time where we go down the street and we take the addresses, write them down. Not everybody recycles every week, but the majority of people, you're talking in the 95 to 98 percentile, do recycle over a month's time. But the volume of what they put out varies greatly. And so the people who tend to put out 2 or 3 bins, and then you got one person that if you made it easier for them with a 65-gallon cart and they could just throw everything in and you don't have to sort and do all of that, because that's really the part that people tell us they don't like and why they don't do recycling. But 95% of the people typically will recycle, but at lower levels than we know can happen if you have a single stream program.
So you're saying 95% of the households in Troy do recycle?
Do recycle, but it varies greatly how much they put out and how many times a month they put out.
I think having it all together is a great idea. If I put my newspapers on top of my bin, it doesn't make it to recycling. I don't know if anybody knows that, but people come around and take your newspapers if they're sitting outside of your bin because they can make money off of that. So I learned to get it into the bin, so I think if you got everything in there, it would make it much better. And the other thing is, just to add, I recycled a lot more when I had 4 in my family than I do now with 2. So that has an effect on how much you recycle too, obviously. But I really think that would be a great idea to get that in all in one bin. I think a lot more people would recycle.
Your point is well taken. There's a lot of scavengers out there, and paper products are a good product. In Rochester Hills, where I have the single stream collection, and they come down and they gave me a 65-gallon cart. I used to put an 18-gallon cart out there maybe 3 times a month, but when it made it easier for me, and I'm no different than most residents, I don't think, I put out that 65-gallon cart the same number of times a month that I put the 18-gallon cart out. So that's how much I think increased volumes that could happen with a good percentage of the community. People, and what disappears because they're scavenged. Because you can throw all your metal products in there with the exception of large things. But it does. A lot of stuff does disappear. Dave?
Got one more question on the fund balance. Maybe one of you folks can answer this for me, but 15% is what we shoot for in the general fund balance. But in a pass-through department such as refuse and recycling, where we only have maybe a person coordinating all that. Is 15% a realistic target?
Well, I don't think it's unrealistic, and I think what we were kind of shooting was kind of a 10%, at least on the graphs that you got, but even at a 10%, we're significantly under where we need to be, especially when you have, excuse me, the accelerators in our providers' contracts. Change, and again, more importantly, you should see the trend, right, that we've been using fund balance consistently over the last few years. We need to reverse that. And we kind of addressed the last budget.
Councilman Teets?
In the last budget, that increased the millage rate.
Yes, it did.
Correct.
That's the 1.05. We also, we passed the budget for 14, that would take it to 1.09, and in 15 to 1.14. Again, we're going to review those again this year as we would through the normal budget cycle, but just to say at least we've taken a stab at it to begin with to try and reverse that cycle and see where we're at.
To keep us from taking from fund balance.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
There's no other questions. I'm going to have Steve Pallotta come up and go through the building operations presentation.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. Who we are? We're an internal service department that provides 24-hour maintenance and administers custodial services. What we do? We're responsible for 55 owned city buildings. And underneath the 55 city-owned buildings, I've brought a few highlights, and we do a lot more than what I've said on the board.
A lot of light bulbs.
Just to put things in proper perspective, we're responsible for 24,180 light bulbs. Can you imagine having that in your house and be responsible for that? We also service, take care, and maintain 342 heating units, air conditioning units, and air handling units at all our facilities. The total square footage that we take care of is 569,778 square feet at a cost basis of about $2.72 a square feet. Within that $2.78 a square foot, the building maintenance cost is about $1.84, and the janitorial service cost is about 94 cents. Our department provides in-house space design and renovations for all departments. And I'll bring up some examples that just happened recently. We just got done remodeling 2 fire station kitchens entirely. Maybe we'll invite you guys up there to see them. We've also changed heating and air conditioning units at 3 fire stations and replaced basically probably about a 20 to 25-year-old units with high efficiency units. And what that does is it obviously saves the city money with our energy costs. Part of our department, we meet renovation needs of all individual departments. Again, I brought up some examples. Carol has brought up some issues too about capital, how we work with them and basically provide cost and analysis, what she needs to provide in her budget so we can make sure that units are getting replaced in a timely manner. We replace heating and air conditioning units. We've done that at our Troy Public Library. Our department was responsible to replace, and we did it in-house at a good cost savings, and we replaced all the rooftop air conditioning and heating units at that facility. We've installed LED lamps at all locations. You probably noticed it on Civic Center Drive. Some of the buildings have been retrofitted now with LED lighting. We've used energy efficient baluses and lights in our buildings along with motion sensors. And what that does, it conserves, excuse me. What that does is it conserves and reduces our electrical consumption citywide. Some people don't know that, but we also assist departments in special events. We help out the city clerk's office with their elections. We're in charge of preparation and delivery of all voting equipment. to 31 precincts. We've been called by the police department to board up a house at night for an emergency situation. So we're basically there for everybody's beck and call. The point is, at the top line, it says what we do. I think it should say what we don't do, people that know us. Our building operation revenue, it comes from a square foot fee that's charged to all departments. Again, we talked about $1.84 a square foot. That represents 1,048,400 dollars in our budget. Excuse me. Some of the other revenue is we take care of our 52nd District Court. We have a lease with them. They pay us a flat rate for building maintenance services of $50,000 a year. They direct reimburse the City of Troy for all utility costs, such as gas, water, electric, and janitorial services. Part of their agreement with the city too is we have maintenance supplies that are used, such as filters, light bulbs and stuff, and those are also paid directly to the city by reimbursement. Little touch and base of our budget history. I would have to go back to our 2000-2008 budget. We were budgeted at $1.5 million. We were under budgeted by $364. That's a pretty good amount of money to be under budget. That was basically due to, we went out and we rebid our custodial contract. They gave us better pricing. And another item was that we had a reduce in staffing levels. Our capital, as far as building operations, we basically administrate and do project management for all projects within city buildings. These projects are paid for and budgeted by the buildings that are occupied, or the departments that are occupied in the buildings. Some of our cost reductions, we've had a decrease in staffing. Again, Tim has pointed out some of the shortfalls of our department. I won't get into the staffing levels, what they are, where they were, and why. He's already touched base on that. Quick bullet point, in 2008 to 2013, we had full-time staff of 12. We've been reduced down to 7. In 2008, 2013, our part-time staff was reduced from 2 persons to 1. Other cost reductions were our mandatory furlough days. Basically, we're taking 28 hours each 2-week pay period, which equivalates to 0.35 full-time equivalent annually. We've also had to take mandatory decrease in wages, which reduces our pay 1.5 hours every pay period. We've also reduced our overtime expenses. We only come in now if we get called in by police dispatch on any emergency that happens in any of these 55 buildings. We reduce our energy cost by updating our equipment, and we've done that at many locations. Some of the items that we've taken care of as far as reducing the energy cost, we've controlled our peak electrical demands through our energy management system. And by doing that, and how it's being done, is we control and alternate our start and stop times of our heating, air conditioning, and ventilation systems, so we don't hit that peak rush demand. So for instance, in January, we got a hot day, and as usual, we have a facility that we have to keep comfortable. We don't want to bring on all the equipment at one time. We will pay a penalty throughout the whole year from Detroit Edison and have to suffer the consequences. Our energy management system allows us to bring on or shed equipment, bring it on slowly so we don't reach that peak demand. Maybe we don't need full air conditioning or full heating that day. We can bring on portions of it. Some pressures and concerns. Again, the decrease in staffing levels. We've become a reactive instead of a proactive department. And Tim has covered that ground. Basically, the amount of people that we're down to, we're just not able to get out in these buildings and keep them like we would like to do. It also impacts our response time. It has slowed us down. Most of our work orders, the turnaround dates were 1 or 2 days. Sometimes it's 4, 5, 6 days, even to get a light bulb changed. And you can imagine all the light bulbs in the community center, how many of those go out. We've also reduced our preventative maintenance on our HVAC equipment. We used to change our filters 3 times a year, and now we're down to 2 times a year. And some of these concerns are due because corresponding buildings were supposed to be closed, and it didn't happen, such as our Troy Public Library. Our future needs, we need to increase the staff levels back to 2008 by 5 full-time employees. We need to take a look at furlough days and possibly eliminate them so we can get more boots on the ground, as they say. We've established capital improvement plans for future projects. Again, we're looking at long-term longevity of major equipment that costs the city a lot of money for replacement, and try to budget that with proper departments. And we're going to reevaluate the lease with the 52nd District Court to cover some of our operation costs. As I pointed out in one of the slides, they're paying us a flat rate of $50,000 a year to maintain their facility. And right now we're charging all other departments, $1.84. So we're really not in line at that, so that's something we're going to look at reopening. Any questions, concerns?
Councilman Deeds.
You said corresponding building closures did not occur, referring to the library. Was it budgeted? All right, is that how it was budgeted? Or?
Yeah, actually, the library was budgeted to be closed. It was set up to be closed, and one thing I would also say about what was happening at that time, everything was happening fast and furious. Actually, recreation, the community center was identified to be closed, but Carol was able to demonstrate she could maintain it open with, fees and programming. So, but, the thought was that those 2 buildings were probably going to be closed, but we were able to save the community center. But clearly there was budget to be closed, and then we budgeted just to mothball the building.
Steve, this is an internal fund, so some people don't understand, I don't think, exactly what that really is, but I know you used to have to compete in a bidding process, such as the kitchen renovation that you did. I assume does that still happen, or do you just now, because you have a flat 1.84, you get those jobs now, and instead of being bid out, and then you have to compete with the private?
At one time, we had to bid against outside contractors for renovation or replacement costs of HVAC equipment or whatever the major project was. It was found out that we could do it a lot cheaper in-house. First of all, the department is paying for our services already. So if we're at the fire department, they're paying $1.84 for our service already. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Our labor cost is going to be way cheaper. And the second thing is that departments feel comfortable by using us. We have that expertise-ism. We're easy to get along with. We're willing to make changes. So if you had a change in a renovation, you're going to be paying for a change order, you're going to be paying for this. Maybe material won't show up on time. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
Right, and
So in the long run,
that's the point I was trying to make.
But to answer your question, we do evaluate those things.
Right.
It's not, if we've just done one project, we know what those costs are, and we're going to do something else identical or similar. We don't every week or every 3 months take a look at that. We look at those over a long-term scenario
Right.
As Steve said, he investigated when we put furnaces and air conditioning units on the library, what those costs would be to go out and solicit a contractor. He was able to put those costs together with our discounts on purchasing that equipment and the labor we had, and putting together the cost to hire the crane to put those pieces of equipment on there, and there were savings in that event, and we took advantage of it.
That was the point I was trying to make, is that over the years, we have investigated privatizing a lot of the work that comes out of the building department, and found out that it was more cost-effective to do it this way than to hire a contractor every time something needed to be done.
And to that point that Steve takes care of 55 buildings here. If you look at our 55 buildings, they are so different and unique that if you were to have a management company that manages a high-rise where they have 2,500 cubicles, and 1,000 of those cubicles are identical, and another 900 are identical, and every light fixture and every switch and every piece of furniture and walls and cubicles and things in there are identical, where you can walk up there with pretty much 2 5-gallon buckets and maintain everything. The inventory is low, the repetition is low, you can get somebody who can, do those types of things. The types of buildings we have, from the historical village through the DPW building, City Hall, the recreation building, which was a high school at one time. There are so many, none of those units are alike or similar to the point where you can just unplug one and plug something in.
They're not kitchen cutter.
No, and so there's more to it, and we've still been able to compete, and it was looked at when the ICMA study was done, and when Monica Ireland was here, she took and spent time with some of the high-rise owners in the community and talked to their people who they hired contracts to try to get apples to apples. It was very difficult. But even with that said, the report came back, and it went to council back when, that we were competitive with our staff and what we do, even with those differences.
To answer your question, yes.
Yeah. When is the lease up with the courts?
That's something we're going to investigate.
Okay.
Any other questions for Steve and I?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'll try to make this as fun as possible. I know we're getting late tonight. Kurt Bobenseet, I am the superintendent of Park Streets and Drains. We'll do the Streets and Drains Division first. What we do, we provide maintenance, repair, and replace to the City of Troy road network. And you can read the numbers there with all that includes. And I'll exemplify that in an example in a later slide. But one thing that I did learn through a different report is the street lights. The wattage that takes those street lights is the equivalent to what it's going to take to power the Freedom Tower. So those 1,000 street lights is equivalent to what's going to take the power of the Freedom Tower in New York. Besides the road network, we also work to maintain a highly efficient stormwater drainage system, and that is regulated through the Oakland County Stormwater Permit and the MDEQ. That drainage system consists of over 700 miles of drains, 6 lakes, and 183 detention ponds. We also are a department that assists the police and fire department in securing a safe environment during emergencies, such as the other night with the structure fire on Long Lake. We were called to go knock the house down. And I'm sure the employee who got that call in the middle of the night said, "No problem, I'll come in, I'll So the next time you're in or traveling through Lincoln, Nebraska, you can remind yourself that it is the distance that if you were to put all our storm drains in a line, that's one of the destinations you would end up. Along with that, if you were to take our 520 miles of sidewalk and put them end to end, you could walk yourself to New York. Or our 265 miles of local roads would take you many places as well. And that does not include that 265 miles. There's an additional 100 miles of industrials and majors and counties that we could have added to that. But that just puts it a little bit in perspective of the infrastructure that we maintain on a daily basis. The streets and drains revenue, this concentrates, our majority of our revenue is augmented through general funds. That's outside of the streets. The drains is augmented through the general fund, but the major streets and the local streets come from Act 51 money, and you can see the revenue and our expenses there. This is 2012-2013 budget. Our county roads, we did put some money back into the fund balance through this revenue, and then that was because of the light winter. The majority of the time, especially on county roads, the revenue that we collect, almost the $250,000. Usually, on average, we're spending an additional $100,000 to $150,000 to maintain those county roads during a snow and ice event. And then the graph on below depicts that you can see how the Act 51 revenue can fluctuate as well. This is a depiction of our budget. This is the budget numbers are from the amended budget. Just pointing out again, in 11-12, our operating budget, we were almost $1.8 million under budget. That again is because we had a light winter. We usually budget for the higher side of moderate, so to speak, or the higher side of average winter. So when we have a light winter, there is definitely savings there. Along with that is we were in the learning curve too with the attrition, the incentive program. With the loss of employees, we had to kind of find a common ground. Along with that, there's a loss of operating expenses. The loss of employees means it was hard to put a number how much less concrete we can lay in a year and so on and so forth. So we're still seeing that figure come down. You can see that reflected in a decrease of just over $400,000 in the 12-13 budget. Capital budget, most of this money is used for roads and sidewalks, whether it be asphalt, concrete, local, major. It's all kind of into that one, and you can see how it's been steadily decreasing over the last few years.